welcome to episode 6 of Let's Talk with Aaron Johnson. This week, we're going to be visiting the judicial branch of the U.S. government and what the Constitution says about it. This is an interesting one, especially with all of the lower courts recording um, injunctions against the federal government and such things. And we're going to see what the Constitution has to say about these things. Um, so let's get started. How about it? All right, so we'll start out with reading Article 3, Section 1 of the United States Constitution. This is Section 1 of Article 3. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges, both of the supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. Then, Section 2. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the laws of the United States, and treaties made, or which shall be made under their authority, to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and councils, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States shall be a party. Then it goes on and explains further to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects. So this gives the Supreme Court a lot of jurisdiction to cover a lot of different things. But again, it's all part of the checks and balances that the Constitution is set up. And the reason is set that up is so that one branch doesn't become more powerful than the other. And if you saw yet, if you listen to my earlier podcast, episode 5, you'll see that some of the um, proposed amendments to the Constitution have been things that would have limited and taken away the power of each branch to take care of itself, to do what needed done, oversee the other. And it's really, really weird that, in the greatest country in the world, we would think that it's better to not have that sort of freedom. Makes no sense. But let's go on here. In all cases affecting ambassadors, this is again Section 2. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. In all the other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction both as to law and fact, with such exceptions and under such regulations as the Congress shall make. The trial of all crimes, except in cases of impeachment, shall be by jury, and such trial shall be held in the state where the said crime shall have been committed. But when not committed within any state, the trial shall be at such place or places as the Congress may by law have directed. Then we get into Section 3, and we've talked about this section in a prior episode. I believe it was episode 3 or 4. I can't remember right off the top of my head. Um, Section 3 states treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. Now, what that last little bit says is that basically, if you are convicted of treason, they can't hold it against the rest of your family and say that your entire family is treasonous. It's solely to that person. And the reason that is important is because during our colonization of the United States under England, if someone was considered found to be a criminal, most of the time they held the family responsible as well, up to execution of the entire family or imprisonment of the entire family. And that's why they put that in there, to basically say it's you're you're the criminal, and therefore you are to be convicted, and your family is not. Um, but this is what Article 3 says about the judicial branch. It does not give the courts the option for nationwide injunctions, which is what a lot of these lower federal courts have been doing recently with um, over illegal immigrants, criminals. That's what they are, um, being um, returned to their country, deported, their country of origin. And they've been issuing nationwide injunctions against the country, which actually is not constitutional. So, with what we have discussed before, and there has been no law allowing such things. It's just been they did it once and nobody said anything and nobody argued about it, and therefore it has set a precedent that they've continued to do that, and that's why it's very important that if a decision is made through a court against a law or in interpretation of a law, that if we feel that it's not right, we need to make sure that it's appealed and taken to a higher court. The reason being is it gets rid of the precedent of that decision, because then that precedent, in addition to court interpreting the law, then it that they also follow the precedent. Well, this happened and this is what the court said. Nobody argued it, so we have a precedent of that happening. So therefore, we're going to continue to allow it to happen. That's why it's very dangerous to allow things to go on unchecked. Okay. Um, call One reason why this nationwide injunction is so dangerous is because they're not interpreting the law, which is their entire point. That's their entire reasoning for existing and to settle disputes. Is they are trying to force legislation or stop the executive branch from performing its constitutional duties. But I found a great blog in Constitution Daily, um, and it's by Marcia Coyle, and she explains further about nationwide injunctions, um, and why actually you won't hear a lot of people talking about it, because honestly, it can be a hot topic, but it can also be a troubling topic. That makes any sense. Sorry about that. It's early, and I needed some coffee. So she starts out with saying the subject is unlikely to trigger dinner table debates and more likely to trigger yawns in some people, but nationwide injunctions are now hot topics in the legal and political worlds, largely thanks to the policies of President Donald Trump. And that's why they have done this. Um, but the links to this podcast, to this article, will be in the comments. So please make sure that you get it and read it for yourself. and make sure we talk about it because this is a very, very important subject, um, especially with the current political climate. Um, but as I've said, the nationwide injunctions for certain court. That's why we have district, federal district courts. And basically, that means that within that area, that court is the top court, and the Supreme Court is over that, over the entire nation. And the problem is that, we have some places, some appellate court set areas that are considered more liberal, and then others that are considered more conservative. And that's why we lawyers and people who want to try to win a case and set up um, precedent do go to these places where they think they'll win in an appellate court, in a higher federal court. And they do that because they want to be able to set up precedent that the rest of the nation can look at. Just because a ruling is passed in the Fifth Circuit doesn't mean um, that a judge in the Ninth Circuit can't look at it and say, okay, we've set up precedent, so this is what we'll go with. You can also set up precedent and say that that precedent is wrong and a misinterpretation of the court. Um, that's why that's why it's very, very important that we pay attention to these things. I know some people say, "Ah, it's just courts, it's just lawyers, it's just judges." Yes and no. There, it's necessary that we pay attention to these things. So this was written on April 14th. So the week before, she goes on to say, Ms. Coyle goes on to say, the House of Representatives last week passed legislation primarily with Republican votes designed to rein in how federal judges use nationwide injunctions. So then she goes on to explain what nationwide injunctions are. And she calls them what are nationwide or universal injunctions. When imposed by a court, they prohibit a defendant in a lawsuit from taking some action against not just the other party in the lawsuit, but also against non parties anywhere in the country. The House bill would limit the injunctions to parties before the court instead of applying them nationally. And that's a good idea because, like I said, um, when they do these national injunctions, they're actually breaking the law and actually interpreting it to mean more or different than what it is. Um, that's why it's very important to pay attention to these things. But this is not something new, actually, because they have been imposed by courts for decades. Um, and I mean, they are a handy tool, but one which liberal judges and conservative judges, I mean, it's judges on both sides, um, use to try to dictate policy. Mainly because, like I stated earlier, it's because they use it to try to control political opponents. Say, Democratic Party passes a law or a president signs an executive order, and then the Republicans are like, "Oh, that's not going to fly," and so then they file in court, and the court rules and issues a nationwide injunction saying you can't do that. It's the same with Republican presidents and Democratic lawsuits against those. So, um, like currently, federal judges have been issuing nationwide injunctions against deporting criminals back to their own country of origin. Um, and as I've said many times before, I'll say it again, the Constitution bears this out. If you enter our country illegally, you are not uh, uh, due any due process, which is the legal term for making sure that all the proper paperwork is filed and all of that. If you are a criminal and you become a criminal when you enter our country illegally, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is the law. Period. Whether you committed another crime in the country or not, once you enter the country, you are a criminal when you cross that border illegally, and you're not due any process. You're caught. You should be shipped back. Period. Um, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is the law. That is the constitutional law. And recently, they've been filing injunctions against the policies of President Trump because he's been enforcing that. Um, and should he be? I'll leave that up to all everybody else. But should the president defend and protect the Constitution? Absolutely, absolutely. So the number of nationwide injunctions, going back to this blog, the number of nationwide injunctions has increased dramatically in recent years. Um, Last year, the Harvard Law Review published a study reporting that from 1963 until 2023, there were a total of 127 injunctions, of which 92 were imposed from 2001 to 2023. And of the 127 total, more than half, 64, were issued against the Trump administration policies in his first administration. Um, and in just the first 3 months of his second term, there have totaling well over 100 involving the firing of probationary federal employees, cutoffs of grants and foreign aid, deportations, and birthright citizenship um, in just his first 3 months in his second term. So, and the reasoning for nationwide injunctions, um, the, they say certain laws should be applied evenly across the nation. And those laws include immigration and clean water and clean air. Nationwide injunctions, they add, promote consistency and the rule of law by blocking illegal government action. That are those who say that nationwide injunctions are a good thing. Critics of nationwide injunctions say that they are politicized tools in the hands of partisan judges. And this is an interesting little fact. For example, of the 64 issued against Trump policies, 92.2% were by Democratic appointed judges. Of the 14 issued against Biden policies in the first 3 years of that administration, all were issued by Republican appointed judges. So we have failed in part of fulfilling the Constitution, because the Constitution, and the reason that these judges are appointed for life, federal judges are appointed for life, is so that they do not become political and that they are not political. But unfortunately, what we've done and what we've allowed to happen, and we've set a precedent, is we allow governors and presidents to not look for the best person for the job or the person with a record as a lawyer or as a lower court judge of merely interpreting the law. We look for those people who agree with our views. Sometimes that means that they do mainly align with Republican views. Sometimes that means they maintain purview with the Democratic view of things. But what we have to demand from our leaders and what we have to demand from judges is legal accountability. In other words, interpret the law, do your job, and only your job. You are one man sitting on a bench, or one lady, one person sitting on the bench. You cannot dictate law for the rest of the United States. What you can is interpret the law that was passed by duly elected officials. You cannot write the law. And what they do is they try to write the law through their interpretation of the law, um, which they're really not. They're making political statements and political views and allowing their own political thoughts to come through. That's illegal. That's against the Constitution. We read exactly what the Constitution says, and they are going against it no matter what. And that's just not the way it's supposed to be. Um, and there are different people. Amanda Frost um, said that they need this type of injunction, particularly great in an era when major policy choices are increasingly made through unilateral executive action affecting millions. The thing with, and maybe this is something that we don't understand, is an executive order is only an executive order. Okay, it does not become law. Okay, it's not. Um, Presidents from both sides with a D and an R behind their name to show their political affiliation have written executive orders. Those executive orders, as a guidance for the country, and can set into motion certain policies, but they are not law. The only way we can make law is, as we discussed in our earlier podcast, is through both houses of Congress. They propose laws, they agree on them, they send them to the president signs them, then they become law on the day he signs them. That's when they become law, or whatever date they pick. A lot of times they give you a leeway so that the law can be understood and processed throughout the country instead of, like, president signing a law, signing a law, a bill into law that says, that you can't have gray hair and it starts tomorrow. Um, they give you time most of the time. But that's how laws are passed. Now, going back to this, talking about executive orders, we had heard a quote by President Trump, and I really like this because all presidents past have done these executive orders and then think that that's passing it into law, when the very next president can sign an executive order and do away with it. Okay, unless Congress makes a bill, agrees on a bill, and passes it to the president, and then he signs it into law following that executive order. And President Trump, or one of his representatives in Congress, or one of his representatives in his administration, made the comment that the reason he signs so many executive orders, especially right at the start, like the first day, at what was it, 100 executive orders or something like that he signed on like his first day in office on his second term. And the reason being is, and they made this same statement, which is exactly what needed to be said for people to understand, is he's signing them early after careful thought and consideration. He's signing these executive orders early to give Congress 4 years to write up a law, to write up a bill, to codify that executive order. So they know and understand that that is not a law. I like that. I like that. Somebody read the Constitution. Somebody knows how laws are made. That was very, very good. So that is why um, it's very important. Now, I do have to agree with some of the arguments that the proponents of nationwide injunction say. And I mean, it kills me to say this, but again, I will say that um, I'm here to talk about the Constitution and what it says and what it doesn't say. Yes, nationwide injunctions are illegal according to the Constitution, but unfortunately, we have allowed the precedent to be there. So, the precedent being there, the past being what we use to help interpret our laws, then these nationwide injunctions have now basically been codified. Um, it's wrong, but we've allowed it to happen. So therefore, there's really nothing else we can do about it. So Stephen Vladeck, I really hope I didn't mess that name up too bad, of Georgetown University Law Center. He wrote a book called the Shadow Docket. This is his opinion. Consider the pending cases challenging President Trump's effort to restrict birthright citizenship. Do we really think that parents should have to challenge that policy one child at a time? Would it make any sense at all for the scope of birthright citizenship to differ in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, simply because those three states fall into three different federal circuits? And I mean, I understand their reasoning for it. You know, say that you have five children and your nationality is in doubt and the nationality of your children are in doubt. And so without nationwide injunctions or saying that because of this law being passed or this decision being passed in the third circuit, it doesn't apply to the fourth circuit or the fifth circuit or all, all the different judicial circuits. And so, he's like, so to follow along his argument, then at that point you would have to argue it five separate times in five separate courts if the uh, bill that the House has passed that goes to the Senate and then would go to the president, that would be yes, you would have to do that. You would have to argue it five separate times. I understand what he's saying. It makes sense to have nationwide injunctions for such things, but the problem is that we can't just interpret the law. We have to be political about it, and that's where the issue comes in, and that's where we have the entire climate that we have right now. So I understand their argument, and I also understand their argument against the proposed bill that the House is discussing and has passed on to the Senate. Do I think that nationwide injunctions are correct? No. Do I think that we have unfortunately allowed that to kind of become codified by allowing the precedent to be set without challenging it? Yes. Is it illegal against the Constitution? Definitely. But again, because we as a people didn't challenge it prior, we now have an uphill battle if we want to get rid of it, because we have to go back and challenge it each and every time, and we have to argue it and start setting the precedent of these nationwide injunctions being overturned and ended. It's going to take some work. It's going to take some dedication. Do I think that we have the people that can do it? Oh, definitely, definitely. And on both sides. See, that's the thing. I try not to be political in things that I discuss. I just simply try to interpret the Constitution for you, and then talk about the recent things that go along with it. Um, do I think that there are people who can fight legitimately on both sides properly? When I say fight, for the love of God, don't think I'm inciting violence. That's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about fighting, I'm talking about writing laws and writing your Congress people, and demanding that they listen to the populace. Do I think that we have the people capable of that? Oh, without a doubt, on both sides, because there are some very passionate people on both sides of the aisle, and very passionate people who know and are smart enough to do things legally. The problem is that sometimes we allow our passion and our thoughts to get in the way, and then we end up with nationwide injunctions that are illegal. The very nature of a nationwide injunction is illegal. I'm not going to say that a certain nationwide injunction is illegal. The very nature of nationwide injunctions is illegal and unconstitutional, plain and simple. And most of those are not an interpretation of the law. They are simply a judge's ability, or a judge trying to curb illegally um, the actions of one of the other branches of the government. That is not their purpose. Their purpose is simply to interpret the law, not try to write a law. And that's what a lot of these judges do. And so that everybody gets nailed a little bit, that's judges from both sides of the political spectrum. And that's just absolutely wrong. It's wrong for the country. It's wrong for the people that's involved in that lawsuit at that particular time. And it's wrong to force that on our posterity, our children, our children's children. Um, it's just wrong. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. Um, and that, I mean, that's a quick and dirty, nasty little um, run through of nationwide injunctions and why they are illegal. Um, there's a whole lot more to be in depth, but make sure that you share this video, comment on it, let's talk. Um, Not getting many comments on my videos on my podcast, but feel free to comment and let's have a discussion about it. Look up the links that I post in the comments section for each one of my podcasts of where I've got my information. And this is very, very important because I want you to see the information that I've got. And if there's information that I overlook, please feel free to share your links so that I can look at them. And I will take the time to look at them, and we will discuss them, either in a future podcast or in the comment section, or even we may even reach out and do it offline, just between us. Uh, but let's have some discussion about this. So share this. Thank you for the all three of you who actually have followed my channel, and okay, it's five, but I'm three of those people. Wait, what? But let's have a good day and make sure that you comment, like, subscribe, follow, share. Please share this stuff. Let's get this out so that we have some common sense thoughts out there with what people are saying and doing and all that. Let's try to curb the fear tactics from both sides of the political spectrum against the other. Because when it's all said and done, we're Americans. It's always been and always will be. America against the world always will be, always will be. Because we have thoughts and ideas and a political system that nobody else can understand because they've never lived through it. But at the same time, they want it, but they also want to change it because we offer unprecedented freedom in our country. No other country in the world offers such freedoms that we do and offers the opportunity to become an actual citizen of the United States. So let's share this. Let's try to share this and get it past where the fear and the fear mongering can have a different voice. But always, always have a great day and let's talk. See you now. Bye.